Hello, I'm Tom Wilkinson, and welcome to the Thinking in English podcast, a podcast aimed at intermediate to advanced level English learners. This week is the beginning of the Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games. While the Games are usually a time of excitement and joy, this time is different. COVID has changed everything. This episode of Thinking in English will introduce some information about the 2020 Tokyo Olympics, discuss why it is so controversial, and then present more general arguments about the benefits and negatives of hosting the Games. But first, why not follow the Thinking in English Instagram page, Thinking in English Podcast, or the link is in the description. And you definitely should look at our blog, thinkinginenglish.blog, for all of the episode transcripts and some bonus content. Here is today's vocabulary list. As always, the written list is available in the description of the podcast and also on our blog, thinkinginenglish.blog. Eagerly. In a way that shows that you want to do or have something very much, especially something interesting or enjoyable. As in, he eagerly accepted an invitation to the party. To anticipate. To imagine or expect that something will happen. For instance, we don't anticipate any trouble. To safeguard. This means to protect something from harm. As in, the union safeguards the interests of all its members. Precarious. A precarious situation is a situation that is likely to get worse. As in, after the bank collapsed, many customers are in a precarious financial position. Peacetime. Peacetime is a period of time when a country is not at war. For example, the country is buying more weapons, even though we are in peacetime. To revive. To come or bring something back to life, or health, or existence, or use. As in, my plants revived as soon as I gave them some water. Alternating. Starting with one thing, then another thing, and then the first thing again, and so on. As in, he is always alternating between happy and sad. To revitalize. To give new life, energy, activity, or success to something. For instance, investment has revitalized this neighborhood. And finally today, stature. This is the good reputation a person or organization has based on their behavior and abilities. He is an artist of great stature. The Olympic Games are supposed to be a time of celebration and joy, where athletes from around the world represent their countries and compete to be recognized as a great athlete. I remember 9 years ago clearly, when the 4 weeks of competitions for both the Olympics and Paralympics in London 2012 felt like a tremendous party across the entirety of the UK. This year is different. The pandemic has changed everything. People are no longer eagerly anticipating the opening ceremony, crowds are unable to attend any of the events, and athletes are beginning to spread COVID-19 amongst each other in the Olympic Village. In fact, in the months leading up to the Games, around 70% of Japanese people were opposed to their country hosting the competition this year. The 2020 Summer Olympic Games were originally scheduled to start on July 24th, 2020, in Tokyo, Japan. However, due to uncertainty surrounding the COVID pandemic, they were postponed in March that year. The Prime Minister of Japan, at that time, Abe Shinzo, along with the International Olympic Committee, made the decision to safeguard the health of the athletes, everybody involved in the Olympic Games, and the international community. The Games were not cancelled in their entirety. Instead, they were rescheduled to take place between July 23rd and August 8th, 2021, which, depending on where you live and when you're listening, means they start in only 2 days. Confusingly, the Games are still being called the 2020 Games, despite it being 2021. While the Games were postponed to ensure people's safety, no one predicted in March 2020 that the pandemic would carry on and become even more devastating over the following months. If anything, the global situation is perhaps even more precarious than it was last year. Earlier this year, the Japanese government decided to ban foreign spectators from attending Tokyo 2020 and extended a nationwide ban on international visitors. If you're interested in finding out how I traveled to Japan in spite of this ban on international visitors, then check out episode 87 of Thinking in English. Moreover, earlier this month, the painful decision was made to hold the Games without crowds at all, and to extend the state of emergency across Tokyo. The 2020 Olympic Games were not the first Olympics to be postponed. The Games of 1916, 1940, and 1944 were all cancelled due to the world wars devastating countries at that time. However, these Games are the first to ever be cancelled in peacetime. How much do you know about the history of the Olympics? Well, they actually have ancient origins. According to historians, the first Games were held in 776 BC, over 2,500 years ago, and they were a festival to honor their gods. The ancient Games were a sports competition for males only, and included sports like wrestling, boxing, chariot racing, which is when you stand on a cart behind a horse, and running. This tournament became incredibly important for ancient Greek society, and actually took place every 4 years for 1,168 years, from 776 BC to 393, when Emperor Theodosius I decided to end the Games. So, if the Games ended 1,500 years ago, when did the modern Olympics begin? When did the competition we know and we understand start? Well, after 1,500 years without the Olympics, a French nobleman called Pierre de Coubertin revived the Games in 1896. The first modern Olympic Games were held in Athens in April of that year, with 241 athletes from 14 different countries competing in 43 events. Other than the cancelled Games I mentioned previously, the Olympics have been held every 4 years since then. Furthermore, the Winter Olympics were founded in 1924, and now the Games take place every 2 years, alternating between summer and winter. Also, The modern Olympics now have a much larger range of sports and are actually constantly adding and changing which sports are included. This year, for example, karate, skateboarding, sports climbing, and surfing will be included for the first time, while baseball and softball, which are incredibly popular in Japan, return for the first time since Beijing 2008. The Tokyo Olympics are obviously a controversial event, and the biggest issue is undoubtedly the risk to public health potentially caused by the games and the athletes and all of the teams coming to Japan to work on the Olympics. While Japan's infection rate has been increasing recently, there are real fears that athletes coming from abroad may bring new COVID variants and problems with them. Much of the criticism from Japanese people, and the reason why 70% of them don't really want the Olympics, is due to these health concerns. Fans, both domestic and international, are also not able to attend events and competitions, and all of the events and competitions will actually take place in completely empty stadiums. Moreover, a number of high-profile athletes have decided to not attend as well. However, I don't think Japan ever seriously considered postponing the games for a second time. It would be an incredible waste of money, of course. But more than that, there would be no time to reschedule the events. Next year, Beijing is hosting the Winter Olympics, and future hosts have already been decided. Paris in summer 2024, Milan and Cortina d'Ampezzo in winter 2026, Los Angeles in summer 2028, and Brisbane in summer 2032. These games also have real importance to Japan, as the 1964 Olympic Games in Tokyo were seen as an important sign of the country's changing image and improving reputation after World War II. And after experiencing economic issues, the tsunami and nuclear disaster in Fukushima, these 2020 games were seen by the government as demonstrating a new revival of the country. However, this is not the first time that the Olympic Games have been controversial. Actually, in almost every event in recent years, there has been a debate over whether hosting the Olympics is a benefit or a negative for the host country. Are the Olympics a useful event which can really help a country, or are they a waste of money? With the rest of this episode, I want to introduce a few of the arguments surrounding the benefits and costs of hosting the Olympic Games. These will not be connected to COVID, but are more general points that could apply to any games, either in the past or the future. I want you to listen to the arguments I introduce and then decide for yourself, what do you think? Are the Olympics beneficial? Maybe think about my arguments in the context of your country or your own hometown. Would you want the Olympics in your country? I want you to think about all of this in English. So, first, I'm going to introduce the pro or positive arguments in support of hosting the Olympics. In normal times, so not this year, obviously, Olympics increase tourism, which can help local economies. For instance, more than 56% of foreign visitors to Brazil for the 2016 Games were new visitors, and Brazil set tourism records with 6.6 million foreign tourists and $6.2 billion. The 1992 Barcelona Summer Olympics made a profit and helped to revitalize the city and transform it into one of the best cities in Europe. And the number of tourists to the UK increased by 12% the year after the London 2012 Games. As well as potential financial benefits, hosting the Olympics can increase the host country's global stature. For instance, being awarded the Olympics contributed towards China's negotiations with the World Trade Organization, Italy joining the UN, Japan joining the International Monetary Fund and the OECD after Tokyo 1964, Spain joining the European Economic Community, and South Korea liberalizing politically. In addition, hosting the Games creates a sense of national pride. According to research, a majority of people believe that their nation's performance at the Olympics was important to their national pride, including 91% of Kenyans, 86% of Filipinos, and 84% of Turkish people. On the other hand, many people are actually opposed to their country or their city hosting the Olympics. One major reason is that the Olympics are expensive. Very, very, very expensive. Since 1960, every Games has cost more than originally expected. The Tokyo 2020 Summer Games were already the most expensive Olympics in history 1 year ago, at 200% over budget. And they are even more expensive right now. A January 2021 study found that no foreign spectators due to COVID-19 restrictions could cost Japan as much as $23 billion. Moreover, the debt caused by the Athens Olympics in 2004 made Greece's financial crisis so much worse in 2007. Often, cities build incredibly expensive facilities and stadiums and houses and hotels, even new subway stations, but then rarely continue using them afterwards. The Olympic Stadium in Pyeongchang for the 2018 Winter Games was already scheduled for demolition before the 2018 Games even began. They built it and destroyed it straight away. Beijing's Bird Nest Olympic Stadium costs Beijing $11 million every year to maintain, and when they host events there, most of the seats are now unused. And probably most famously, in Rio, many of the facilities are now broken, uncared for, dirty, vandalized, and no one wanted to buy any of them. They tried to sell the Olympic Village and the Olympic Park. No one wanted them. And finally, the Olympics can be inconvenient for the residents of the host city and country, or even force people out of their homes. According to Clift and Manley, to make way for Beijing's 2008 Olympic infrastructure, an estimated 1.5 million people were forcibly evicted from their homes with minimal compensation. The neighborhoods were destroyed and residents were moved to the outskirts of the city, far from their friends, their family, and their places of work. So here is today's final thought. In this episode of Thinking in English, I have introduced some basic information about the 2020 Tokyo Olympics, discussed why they are so controversial, and ended by introducing more general arguments about the benefits and negatives of hosting the Games. What do you think? Do you think Tokyo 2020 should have been postponed again? Or even cancelled? Do you think Japan is taking a risk? What would you think if your city hosted the Olympics? Would it be beneficial for your neighborhood, or your family, or your friends? What should happen to the stadiums and facilities after the Olympics are finished? Thank you for listening to today's episode of Thinking in English. Please share with your friends, check out our social media links in the description, and send us a message. We really appreciate all of your feedback. And if you have any ideas for topics or future podcast guests or any other learning format, please let us know. And please leave me a rating. We're now on Instagram. I'm sure you've already seen it, but go there, check it out. Lots of good content about vocabulary, pronunciation, and grammar. And Instagram is a great way to contact me. It's Thinking in English Podcast on Instagram, or the link is in the description. Also, all of the transcripts of the podcast are now available on the Thinking in English blog. Vocabulary list, comprehension questions, and all of the articles are there for you to read. That link is also in the description, so please check it out too. Thank you, and see you next time.